clap again.
Yeah, so please clap again.
Yep.
Hello. Hello. How's everyone doing this morning? Good. Good. It is a pleasure to be here. I love talking to people in education most of the time. I say oftentimes it's interesting is I have found there's rarely a group that requests my speaking or consult more, and there's rarely a group that's more resistant to what I actually have to say than educators. And it kind of shocked me at first, but it really makes perfect sense when you think about it. I'm assuming if you are an educator, you didn't get into it for the money. Unless there's a big lie that everyone's been telling about teaching, and it's really this great racket and you're just raking it in. You got into it because you love educating, you love your students, you love passing knowledge. It's something that you've probably amassed a great deal of debt for, that you've spent a lot of hours for, that you've worked long days with very little support, with children that are lovely. I say this as a mother of two. And to have someone come in and say, did you know you're probably hurting your students in a way that is not easily undone, is not a wonderful thing to hear. And I'm sure that many people in this room have tried to have similar conversations with other people in education, just as others may have tried to have that conversation with you, and you found that being on either side of that conversation is incredibly difficult. I got into my work writing about race because I felt like I really had to. I felt like I was being gaslit by all of the greater Seattle area. Seattle and its vicinity. I say Seattle knowing me as I was going to high school, so I'm going to pretend like this is Seattle, Linwood, Seattle, it's all Seattle. Likes to pretend that it has it all right? That it is anti-racist just by nature. Everyone recycles. But I found when it came down to it, people come much harder for recycling than they do for Black lives. And I see the outrage when you enter a building that doesn't have a recycle bin. And unfortunately, far outpaces the outrage we see over wealth gaps by race in this county, by arrest rates for people of color, by the opportunity gap in our schools, or the lack of funding for many of our schools. I always wondered if maybe we decided that we were going to somehow tie recycle bins to schools. Maybe if we tripled the cost of recycle bins, we could take the excess and give it to the schools. And I bet it would pass. This is a city with an area with a lot of hypocrisies. But if you grow up here and you're constantly hearing that everyone is liberal, everything is great, and then there's a very distinct way in which you are treated as a person of color, and particularly a Black person in this area, you start to wonder, have I completely lost my mind, or have I slipped into an alternate reality where there's this haze in front of me and the world just looks completely different than what everyone else seems to be noticing? And so I started writing about race because I was trying to talk to people face to face. It wasn't going. People were getting very upset. I was definitely disturbing a balance. I was backtracking in an agreement that I didn't realize I had made with the region, which was that I was going to be polite and quiet and happy, and I was going to mimic the behavior of the people around me, and in return, they were going to let me exist in this space. And that wasn't an agreement I wanted to make. And I started to realize that there was going to be no promotion, no job change, no notoriety, no quietness, no complacency, no peacefulness that was ever going to make it to where I didn't have to keep making those sacrifices. And I was going to have to make them at 40, 50, 60, 70. And even worse, my children are going to have to make them. And they were already starting to. And I just decided, well, what do I have to lose then? Might as well start talking about this. And so I did. And what I found often, even when I was writing my book and going through life to try to explain these concepts that people have difficulty discussing around race, because I really wrote this book because after years of writing on race, I found that oftentimes people are having fights, arguments about race, and they don't know what they're talking about. Or they're having two different arguments. And there's a lot of disdain for a lot of these terms and concepts around race theory that serve real purpose, that can actually help us understand what's happening in the world and move forward connectively. But in the age of the internet, you don't actually have to know what a word means in order to use it. You just know that it will end that Facebook argument, or will get more likes on your post. And so as I was writing my book, I was talking about these terms that I thought were fundamental to our discussions, areas where I thought people were tripping up around discussions of race. And then I knew I was going to have to tie this to everyday life, because I knew, A, that if anyone's life experience, any people of color's life experience had been like mine, they were constantly told that the everyday things they were seeing that had to do with race had nothing to do with race and weren't important, weren't worth mentioning, that maybe you were whining or paranoid or bitter or angry. And the opposite was true. But also I knew that there were white readers who, if they didn't feel that tug, if they couldn't for a moment imagine that they were the sad, left out, hurt, insulted person, they weren't going to read further in the chapter. And so that's the unfortunate double side of that part of my book. But as I was going through stories trying to figure out, okay, for this term on cultural appropriation, for this term, talking about why can't I say the N-word, all of these different ideas, many of these stories led me back to my time in school. It was often in these environments where young people are practicing building societies that they start mimicking what they're told in ways that really make bigotry and bias play. And oftentimes educators, in interacting with young world builders, make structural bias in our systems play. Because they are tasked with preparing young people for entering this world and finding their place in the world and helping to shape the world. And often in those expectations, in how those expectations are divvied up, how rules are enforced, where kids are encouraged, discouraged, we find a lot of the racist structures of our society. So when I wrote my book because I couldn't find at the time, when I was researching for this book, a practical guide for taking these concepts that I knew were incredibly useful and applying them to everyday work, applying them to your days in school, at work, with your family, to actually move conversations forward into action. And the book was, I'd say, first embraced by schools. And many teachers, administrators were finding themselves stuck in very difficult conversations, or to be more accurate, avoiding very difficult conversations on issues of race. And I found that many educators of color were finding themselves kind of beating their heads against the wall trying to push forward conversations on race with coworkers that were having difficult conversations. And it's important to recognize, and I think you know in this room likely, that when we're talking about schools, we're talking about various levels of racial dialogue that are happening. We have the world of students, where they are learning, they're bringing in conversations from their home, what they're seeing on social media, what they're hearing in the news, what they're seeing in film, and they're practicing world building. We've got educators who are tasked with guiding young people down their path of world building in a responsible way. And we see all of the nuances of not only how they've been influenced by pop culture, by the same media, by the same social media, but also structurally how the education system has molded them and what expectations have been set on them. And once again, the expectations that parents are setting upon the system itself. And then we have a co-working environment where we have educators and administrators of different races coming together, spending all of their days together, and having their own issues around race interpersonally that may have very little to do with students. And so oftentimes when I'm in these environments, I have found that I'm kind of weaving through and trying to figure out where this part of this conversation needs to happen here, and where it needs to happen there, and what sort of things need to be considered. I've probably been to 50 or 60 schools in the last year and a half. And I've definitely seen some patterns that I'll share, because they might seem familiar, they might be enlightening. One, I found that I have rarely entered a school that had staff of color where the staff was not keenly aware of issues that students were facing. Now, it doesn't mean that every staff member of color is prepared to address them. I've found that sometimes staff members of color are the most ardent upholders of white supremacy in education because they've been told time and time again it's the only way that these children are going to get ahead. But it doesn't mean they aren't aware. Not only were they children of color themselves, but they carry that responsibility, that knowledge, and they're oftentimes the people that students turn to. I have often found, though, that even though staff members of color are oftentimes fully aware of what is happening in schools, they are rarely supported by their coworkers and almost never supported by administrators. I have found time and time again that the first thing that kills any attempts at racial justice in schools, any attempts at real, true, healthy education, is the moment a parent complains and you find out that your administrator does not have your back. I've spoken to teachers time and time again who say, I tried this program, got a complaint, and I found no one was willing to help. I found oftentimes that students, by the time they hit about sophomore year in high school, students of color have completely given up on teachers and staff. I've seen this too, especially when I've come back to schools multiple years to see the same students. I come back the next year and I'm shocked by how much less willing they are to talk to me. They say, I don't even bother anymore. Who am I going to talk to? And I don't blame them, because even when they do talk to me, the most I can tell them is, I'll pass it on. I have found how deeply alone students feel with lack of diversity in their teaching staff. I remember asking a group of students last year who they talked to when they have issues with race in school, and students said, well, the only Black person who works in our school is the janitor. And we talked to him. So he's cool, and it's nice to know there's a grown-up there who hears you, but we're pretty sure he can't fix this for us. I have found time and time again that no matter what students say about reading material that is offensive and harmful, they are never listened to. I'm stunned to still get regular emails and calls from teachers saying, my students, you were reading Huck Finn, and the students don't want me saying the N-word, what should I do? I mean, I thought it was I thought the answer was in the request. It's don't say the N-word. And yet, time and time again, I'm having these debates. And I check in with people to see if it's just me and asking, are you having these problems in your schools? They're like, oh, yeah. This material said the N-word. I mean, it's at least once a week I get an email from someone in a school who's upset. I find that most schools have no written procedures for dealing with racism in schools. They'll have procedures for sexual harassment. And trust me, that's a low bar, because I've seen those procedures. But there's something. They'll have procedures for physical violence. But when I ask them, what do you do when one kid in your class calls another kid the N-word? Like, well, it depends on the kid. Now, granted, I'm not a fan of zero tolerance policies. I think if you've been following recent news. But to have no rule, no procedure, no follow-up, no pathway for teachers, for parents when they're coming in and saying something's happening, you're just asking for disaster. I've found that teachers are terrified of acknowledging race in their classrooms. Time and time again, I'm told, how can I make my students of color know I see them? Like, well, have you tried acknowledging that they're students of color? They're like, what? I'm like, trust me, you're not going to surprise them. They're wondering why you haven't figured out that they're Black, Hispanic, Asian. They know. But you could show that you know. And every time they get, oh, you want me to just say Black? Yes. You just did it. It happened. It worked. One exercise that I like to do with teachers when they try to figure out if they can actually acknowledge race in their lesson plan is I tell them to start saying white. Say, go through your lesson plan for the day. Look at every book, every film, every reference. And anytime you're talking about a white person, say white. Anytime you're talking about a white man, write white man. And see how far into your day you can go before you're going to want to start adding what? Asian, Latinx. Because you're saying white 99.9% of the time. Your students hear white. And just because you're not putting a word to it doesn't make it less ridiculous. Less clearly white supremacist. And figure out what percentage then would make it okay. Who exactly are you serving when you say white 99% of the time? Because you're not serving your white students either. And I've also found that many times educators only think they have to address issues of race if they have students of color in their classroom. As if their white students will never interact with a person of color, will never make decisions that impact the lives of people of color. I find oftentimes that they think that a white-centered education is a great education for white students. And therefore, students of color need their own version for students without recognizing that actually a white-centered education is a lie. It's not an education at all. What you're being told is a myth. What you're being told is how to uphold white supremacy. And I've often found, too, that when educators come to me and they're talking about how to address issues around opportunity gaps, how to keep kids fired up in class, they never ask, what exactly do I want these students to ace? If they get straight A's in the curriculum I'm teaching, is that actually victory? If these students are seen as leaders as the way we define leaders, is that victory? If they are writing in the only style we teach, is that victory? If they're learning a one-sided history and they ace that test, is that really victory? Is that really success? I'm listing these off the top of my head because, like I said, it happens literally all the time. But one thing I've also seen is that whenever I talk to students, we spend about 10 minutes talking about this stuff. Before they're ready to go, they've got ideas. It is so easy for them. Once you tell them, hey, did you know that there's other things out there? Did you know that this thing that doesn't fit right, that's rubbing up against you wrong, isn't all there is? Once they're given permission to look outside of what they've been told is a proper education, they run wild. They have great ideas. One of my favorite exercises to do with students, and it's something that I wish I could have faculty and teachers watch, but not be in the room because they completely change the environment the moment they're there. As we talk a little bit about race, I start giving some ideas. I start talking about the different things I've seen. I start talking about some of the ways in which I was told that there's only one way to do things, one way to learn things. And then we just start brainstorming class by class by class. And we say, if you had a classroom that really believed in racial justice, what would your history class? We always start with that one is the easiest. And they start bringing up ideas and things they would like to know about, things they would like to hear. Usually the first thing that's done is they would love for Black History Month to not exist, and because it's turned into Black Trauma Month for them. Mm-hmm. And they would love to just hear about Black people's contributions throughout the entire year. And most kids who are children of color who aren't Black would really love it if they weren't told that they should just be happy with Black History Month, as if that represents anything in their life and their history. And then we move on to things that are a little more difficult. English. And they're astounded to find out that that almost every culture has a different form of poetry that they can be learned, outside of just haikus. Yeah. And we read a couple, I read a couple of my favorite poems from all around the world, and they're astounded. They're like, that's a poem? It is. And they start talking about all the different things they would love to learn. Hip hop. We talk about math. We move to science. We talk about sex ed. Sex ed actually is usually one of the liveliest conversations, not for reasons that you might think. It's because many kids find that culturally insensitive sexual education is useless to them. And they get so excited about what could happen that we fill up whole walls of whiteboards with ideas multiple times over. And then I have to leave. And I have to say the same thing I always say, which is, I will pass this on to your teachers. And all I can tell them time and time again is, if you don't see these changes, I at least have to tell you that you're right. And if you never hear that again, I'm sorry, but it's true. Hear me now, you are right. You are right, and they are wrong. You should be getting more. And I wish I could give it to you, but at least know that you're right. And that's one of the most heartbreaking things, to be so elated to see kids jumping up and shouting out ideas. And then knowing all I could give them was one day where they all came together, all heard each other, and all felt heard. And a grown-up said, you're right. And a lot of these kids graduate without hearing it ever again. And that's why this work is so crucial to me. I've worked in racial justice for a while now. I've lived in racial justice my whole life. And we can talk about giving back what was taken. We can talk about reparations. But you absolutely cannot give childhoods back. And I'm counting childhood all the way through college. Because my son is 18, and I'm pretty sure he would starve to death as a fully stocked So, still a child in my book. Pretty sure he actually just called while I was talking. I think I'll have a text message that says I'm hungry. Son. But we can't give these years back. 18 is too old to find out that you can shape the world in your image. Instead of being shaped by the world. 18 is too old to find out you could have been an inventor. You could have been a politician. You could have been an artist. I sit down with 18-year-olds and I ask them why they're studying what they're studying, 18-year-olds of color. And it's so often decided for them. And they're the success stories. The ones who fought and scrambled out of a racist system to find a pathway open to them, to find a way to maybe undo what was done to them. But that's not a hope and dream. That's survival. And I look at the dedication that students of color are pouring into just getting through their day, getting through their classes, through their degrees, and they think, oh my God, what could you have done in something you loved? What could you have done in whatever it is that's your true talent? And I can't give that back. And so we have to have difficult conversations. The last time I met with a group of students, we had this wonderful conversation talking about race, and I was getting ready to leave, and a student raised her hand, and she said, okay, this was a lot of fun. Now, how do we get our teachers to do this? I said, that's a great question. And what I had to do was spend most of the time explaining why teachers are afraid. Why they're so much more afraid than students. Explaining what racist parents are like. Explaining what it's like to be underfunded and have short time and not have the support of your administrators. And trying to give students tips to shore up their teachers so that their teachers can have the strength and the courage to talk about this issue. Something's gone very wrong. Because we should be more afraid of failing our students than racist parents. We should be more willing to stand up for true education than we are. We should be looking at what we can tear down and rebuild in the image of our children, instead of constantly looking at our best bet is shaping and molding these children into a world that's not fit for them. I think it's easy for us to forget at times that with every generation we have the opportunity to start new. That this system was built by people. It wasn't built by God. It wasn't built by some great secret mysterious force. It was built by people who are no smarter, no kinder, no more special than us. And each generation we have truly special beings who come into our midst. And instead of trying to take our bit of power in their little world and show them that they can shape things and mold things and make a difference, we try to shape and mold them. And it's one of the cruelest things that we can do. And it doesn't mean that it's easy. I have raised children telling them to throw fits when things aren't fair. I was told so many times as a kid, life isn't fair. And it wasn't until I was looking around the world as an adult and realized what incredible harm that does. What you're saying is not an observation, life isn't fair. We know this. I could be hit by a car at any moment and die. Life isn't fair. What we're saying is don't fight it. Get used to it. It's one of the worst things we can tell children. And yet we do. We tell them, stop throwing a fit. Life isn't fair. Pick your battles. And I've raised kids to throw fits, to pick every battle, to know that all injustice matters because it all leads to larger injustice. And I have paid for that in many ways. The amount of times I've said, why are you like this? And they're like, you made me like this. But I want them to shape the world. I want to see the world like they see it. I want to be outraged at things that are outrageous. I want to be hurt by things that are hurtful. I want to be sad about things that are sad. And in living in this life and constantly talking and telling people to be in this space and trying to live in this space, I've realized that when you can do that, you also get to live in joy and wonder. You can't prepare yourself for a hard world. You can't allow yourself to be molded by something as uncreative, as stultifying as white supremacy, and ever expect to experience true joy, wonder, creativity, or passion. I cry more now from joy than I ever thought was possible. And I want our children to have that. And I think that we can do that. But that means that we have to decide that our children are right. We have to decide that they know what the world should look like. And mostly we're here to make sure that they don't trip and fall, or beat each other up, or eat weird things they're not supposed to eat. Do all of the other things that kids try to do to endanger themselves along the way. Because that core greatness is already there. And I'm excited for what can happen when we give that space to children. When we give them a safe place to explore and try. When we tell them that they are practicing world building. When we tell them the worlds they're building in their classroom matter. And that if they want, they can make it exactly how they want the world to look like when they grow up. It's important to remember that if we were faced with a student who said they wanted to be an engineer, and we never gave them a math class, they would likely never be an engineer. And if we want our children to be anti-racist, if we want them to be active, caring, connected citizens, and we never teach it, it will never happen. And so I recommend that you try to think about that and think about how you can model that in your day-to-day work and your life to make it such a practice that it's unthinkable that you wouldn't bring it into your schools. And I guarantee you that while the young people you face will be louder, messier, more argumentative than you could ever imagine, and I know you've seen it, but it gets worse. They will also be so joyous and free. And a free child, especially a free child of color, it will keep you going. It will give you such joy. It will let you know that you're on the right path, that we are on the right path. It will keep you going in Trump's America. It will let you know that we are winning. And so I hope that you take that opportunity each day. And I hope that you look at each bit of freedom you see as your reward for that work. And that you protect it more than anything else in your day. Right? I'm done lecturing. And we have some time for question and answer, I think. Do we? Okay. There's a microphone. Oh, right here.
Any questions?
That's good, thank you.
Nope.
Wow.
Here's one.
Oh. I'm gonna get my steps in today. I could really just use my teacher's voice because I'm loud. But thank you for being here with us today. My question is, of all of the work that you do with the students, how do you share that out? Is that something that others can see so that we can begin to try to incorporate that, or where's that information? And can you share it?
So usually I try to share with whatever school I'm at, of course, and make sure I kind of am writing down and keeping notes. But no, I haven't actually started really compiling into like a workbook. I kind of keep it for when I'm teaching sessions and doing workshops. And I try to share on social media, honestly, what I'm seeing a lot, and also just it's also a place where I check to see, is this a unique situation I'm seeing here? Are we seeing more of this elsewhere? But no, I haven't really compiled, and it's definitely something I think, as I've been looking at whether or not I want to keep diving into workshops in schools, whether or not I want to put together a more cohesive collection of observations so that people could easily access them. But it's also something too, I think I would love to sit down with probably a room full of educators as well and work through, right? Because I do the easy part. I get to come in, fire at children, and leave. And the implementation and things like that, I think sometimes handing a list of suggestions to teachers without the implementation can do more harm than good, especially when it comes to issues of rights. I've seen what happens when people dive in and don't have any kind of safeguards in place to kind of protect children of color, especially when they're trying to do work around race. Can be quite difficult. So yeah, it's definitely something I think I've thought of, like what would be the most responsible way to do it. But mostly what I try to do right now is just make sure that the administration or the district that I'm in gets a full accounting of what I'm seeing. If I'm in a school because there's an issue, because I am brought in oftentimes to schools after there's been an event, then that's a much more formalized process, right? Where everything is fully documented to the point that I need to be able to hold a school accountable or a district accountable. But that's a different situation that oftentimes has the same group problems. It's just it reaches a point where someone's been harmed in a way that a school finally realizes they have to take action.
That can be such food for thought.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Thank you so much. I guess, what are strategies or recommendations to making sure that families are incorporated in this process?
Some of the simplest things I've seen in schools that always shock me too is simple things like school communications only going out in English. It's one of the easiest things that a school could do is to actually find out, what other languages are commonly spoken. Having translators at school student parent teacher conferences, and I've been to schools where they have that, and the ease with which parents feel like they can come and participate is definitely visible. Having childcare at family nights at school. Oftentimes, families of color often will have larger families with young children at home. And the ability to like just leave and show up, or you don't want to take a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old along with you to these conferences, makes it very hard to engage. I've also found that being clear about racial justice as part of your curriculum, as part of your school or classroom goals, documenting that, sending it to parents, along with expectations as to what that will mean for your environment, is really important. Oftentimes what I find where things go south is that parents have a often antiquated idea of what will happen racially in class. And it's white parents and parents of color, right? Often white parents think their kids are going to be centered, they're going to be coddled. If there is a problem, it's not going to be their kid. That issues like race will be treated just like classroom taunting. Oftentimes I find parents of color are told repeatedly to never make waves, to not bring concerns, that it will make it harder on their kids. And so I often tell teachers, put forth your expectations around racial justice issues, along with what you expect from yourself and how open you are to hearing feedback and having conversations, and what you expect of other students is one way to let parents know that they can come to you. Identify yourself as an ally if you are one to your students on racial justice issues. Parents rarely know who to turn to. Every school says they care about all students of color, they care about non-discrimination, but they have no policies for it, they have no pathways for teachers. They rarely communicate anything other than we're seeing a movie that has slavery, FYI. That's about it. And then also I would say, one thing that the studies show time and time again is that positive feedback is rarely given to parents of color. And if the first thing that a family ever hears from you is your kid caused a disruption, you're sending a very distinct message to them about who you are and whether or not you can be trusted. And I would say never let even the first 2 months of school go by without some sort of positive message being sent home to parents, letting them know what kids are doing that's great. And then also just communicate with parents as if students are struggling or having issues. I think there's often an assumption that parents of color, especially parents of color, that they have 2 working households or a single parent working household, that they are too busy, they don't care. And I think you have to really find where parents are, how they like to communicate. I have found much bigger success when you send home a form saying, how do you like me to contact you? And what time of day do you like to be contacted? That really lets parents know that, if you're working those hours, you can't get right back, or maybe you never check your email. Maybe you needed a different type of alert. I've been texted by my kids' teachers because I'm always traveling for work, and they knew I do care. I am completely unreachable most of any other way. But letting them know, working with parents in their schedules. And another thing I would say for schools in general, move your parent-teacher association times. I talk about racial justice all the time, and I talk about how often these school events and access and volunteer opportunities are all during the times that many parents who are working, especially hourly wages, can't get to. And I'll be asked, oh, can you come talk to our PTA at 9 a.m.? No, I will not do this, right? Move it to a time that people can attend, and also have other ways for people to participate, whether it's call-in, whether it's a summary that can be made available to parents that can't make those meetings. But working with the parents, I think, is so important. And it will, while it seems like a lot of effort on the front end, I've also seen how harrowing it can be for educators to try to chase down parents and not know why the 10th or 20th email they've sent isn't being answered, and you're just not reaching them in a way that they're ever going to be able to respond. And if you find that pathway, then parents will jump at that opportunity to provide feedback. They'll reach out to you when they have concerns. And I've always known which teachers were the ones. With my son, I dragged my son kicking and screaming through high school. Right? He came into every English class being like, don't get excited. I am not a writer. You will get a D from me if you're lucky, right? And I had to pull him And I knew which teachers were the ones to email, to call, that would like check on him. I knew who was going to tell me if he was behind and who wasn't. I knew who was only going to reach out to me when he was getting ready to fail a class, and who was going to tell me that they tried something and it was working. And the difference that made, like in being able to collaborate with those few teachers I identified, is what got him through. But there are so many other students who are lost in those cracks. So many other students whose parents too aren't public figures, right, that school districts want to impress. And it really matters, and I think that we put a lot of effort towards white children. I think when white children start floundering, we say, oh, is something happening? Is something happening at home? And then we reach out to the parents, let me try this. And then the students of color, we think, oh, there's an attitude problem. The amount of times my brother, even coming up in school, was told he had a chip on his shoulder without even asking him what's going on. I remember he was told once, someone was like, yeah, I know, you're trying to fight the man. And my brother's like, what are you talking about? I just wanted to sleep in. Like, I don't understand. I'm not fighting a man. But we don't ask students. We don't ask them what's going on. I've been called into schools where students just had maybe had a cold coming and were cranky. And we're told that they had an attitude problem in class. You're like, wait, it looks like a cranky child. I've seen cranky children before. But not having that communication, not being able to stop, ask the child, ask the parents, have they been getting a lack of sleep, you know? My own son, it was so embarrassing. My son, I remember one time, came home and he was stashing bags of food under the bed. I said, what's happened? He said, the school said they noticed I was hungry, so they did a collection for me. I was like, oh, you mean, so the food that he was like, the food that you're too lazy to microwave in the mornings, and so you go to school without breakfast, and now they're thinking that they're taking food that could go to a family that needs it, and they're giving it to you, and you're hoarding it under your bed because you're like free snacks. Because no, they saw a kid of color who said he's hungry and assumed he was starving. And there's nothing wrong with being poor. I was that kid growing up, but like that's food that goes to me, right? And a simple phone call of like, hey, even just, would you like it if we sent food home? I can say, oh no, because it's going to breed rats. Because my son's going to hide it under the bed. It's going to be extra snacks for him. He already has a stocked freezer, right? But like, so the idea that people would reach out to me, would regularly contact me, was unheard of. And I think so often for kids of color, there's so many assumptions being made, so little just regular communication, that kids are either underserved or served in weird ways. I've run into kids that were put in ESL classes, even though they were born in the United States, because someone saw their name and said, where are your parents from? And said, that was me. Yeah, we're gonna put you in. And it's still happening today. And no one ever thought, let's contact the parents. Let's ask, let's ask them. And so I just think really a lot of it is about finding parents where they are, and to stop a lot of the assumptions we make about parent availability, family availability, is based on this really antiquated notion of one working parent, one parent at home. During, with all the time in the world, soccer moms, all that stuff. That doesn't exist, honestly, for most parents of any race, but disproportionately impacts families of color. You had a question?
I did, but she said I don't have time.
I think next time we're just gonna have a conference just for you. We'll just have like a 3 week